Do you do like the self-review, self-act thing, like Mr. Beast did?
It's all good. Okay, so $4 per bag of soil. Catherine, you want to go?
The plants cost $10 each.
All right, $10 per plant. Okay, there's a hand back there, Alberto.
No more than $100.
So she can spend no more than $100. Okay, what else?
She wants to buy 5 plants.
She wants to buy at least 5 plants. Okay, so the first thing, this is all good information. This is everything we need. Before we keep moving on, we need to define some variables, right? We need to define some variables. So we need to define a variable for how many bags of soil she bought. So what could I do to describe bags of soil? Just a letter to describe for me. Joshua?
For bags of soil, you put B.
Okay, so I'm going to say B is equal to number of bags of soil. Okay, and I need another variable to describe the amount of plants that I bought. Can someone help me out here? You do P. P equals number of plants. Okay, so this is great so far. So the next thing we want to do is we want to describe how much money you spent on just soil. I want you to try and form how much money did you spend on soil. And to help us out, I want you to look and see how much does each bag of soil cost. How much does it cost per bag of soil? Catherine? $4, right? It costs $4. So how would I write an expression to describe how much money I spent just on soil? How would I write it using everything I have right now in front of me? What would I write to describe just how much soil that I bought? You want to give it a try?
It's 4B.
4B, why?
Well, because if it's $4 per bag, so he would stand for how many bags you buy. So if you buy like 4 bags, he would, instead of B, you put parentheses how many bags you buy.
Right, 4. So yeah, you're exactly right. So it'd be 4B describes how much money we spent on just soil, right? Your bags of soil. Right, so 4B stands for $4 per bag of soil, right? For every bag of soil, it costs $4. So, how do we describe how much money we spent just on plants? How do we describe how much money we spent just on plants?
Did you put 10P?
Right, 10p. So the money we spent just on plants is $10 per plant. Right there. And again, you don't have to write all of these on the test. This is just to help you out to know how to do these in the first place. Okay, so again, you don't have to write all of these on the test. This is just to help you write what's on the test. Joshua,
If we
question.
got the answer in a different way than when you wanted us to get it, would you count it wrong? Or like partially right, or just like right?
It matters how you got to the answer.
Like say I got it, and you understand how I got it. Like if I guessed the answer and I got it right.
For this chapter, that's okay.
Wait, 10 plants equals $10? What?
No, $10 for the plant.
10p
$4 per bag.
is $10 per plant. So,
They're saying that's 10 plants.
no, it's
No,
not.
no, no, no.
For every plant you buy.
Yeah,
Every
$10
plant you
per
buy, you have
plant.
$10.
$20.
And why after 10? It's just P equals 10.
Because it's not that it's,
P is the amount of bags you buy, you don't know
Right.
how many bags she's bought yet.
yeah. We don't know how much money she spent yet. It's a good question though.
What does P have to do with the bag? The P is for the flour. Wait, it's
So yeah, so $10 means like each plant that you buy,
Oh, okay.
it's times it by 10, right?
only bags of soy.
Okay, so far we've gone this information so far. So I want to use this to describe how much money she spends in total. Okay? So again, all of these things are building up to a step, which is that we want to describe how much money does she spend in total. I know that she tells us how much she's going to spend, but I want to look at how much money she spent just on bags of soil, how much she spent just on plants. How would we use those two things to describe how much money she spent in total? So just looking at what we just created a few minutes ago, how do we use 4B and 10P to describe how much money she spent overall? So I'm going to say total money spent equals what? How do we know how much money she spent overall? And it doesn't have to be a defined number. I want to just describe it using the variables I just created. How would we do that? Alberto, you want to give it a try? Okay, we can come back. So how would we describe how much money she spent in total? And I want you to think about what we just created just now. So you want to think about, what is she spending her money on here? What is she spending her money on here? What is she purchasing here? What is she buying? She's buying plants and she's buying bags of soil. So what is she spending her money on? Bags of soil and plants. So what describes the total money she spent on just soil? 4B. And what describes the total amount of money she spends on plants? So how would we total the total amount of money she spent altogether?
4B plus 10P.
Right, 4B plus 10P, right? Because that's just the total amount she spent on just soil plus the total amount she spent just on plants. So we know that the total amount she spent just on bags of soil plus the total amount she spent just on plants, that equals the total amount of money that she spends overall, right? Okay, we're almost there. And again, all of these steps are extra because I want to break it down step by step. But normally, you could just jump straight to 4B plus 10P. You could skip all of these steps and jump straight to 4B plus 10P. But that's once you get better at this. Okay, so now I want you to read the sentence that you wrote down. How much money does she spend overall? What does it tell us about how much money she spends overall? Okay.
No more than $100.
No more than 100. So what does that mean? Is that less than or equal to? So you're saying that she spends less than 100 or equal to 100. Is that correct? Okay, yeah, that's correct. So we know that the total amount of money she spends is less than or it's equal to 100 because she spends no more than 100, but it could equal 100. Okay, so we have written one of the inequalities, right? We have written one of the inequalities. That's great. We're almost done. So now we just need to write one more. Okay, so before then, let's break it down into smaller parts. So the first thing we want to figure out is what describes how many bags of soil that she bought. What describes how many bags of soil she bought?
40.
Does that describe how much bags of soil she bought?
No,
Remember, what does that describe?
how much you spend.
On the bags of soil, right? So it's close, because it does talk about soil, but it also talks about the money. So we don't want to talk about the money. We just want to talk about how many bags she bought. So we have written this down already. So how do we know how many bags she bought? What did we describe this as? Does anyone remember? It is written on the page with us. We don't know how much she bought yet.
She bought 5.
So remember, there's a way to describe things if we don't know how much she bought. What's a way to describe something that isn't set yet? What do we call that in math? It's a variable, right? So I want you to look at your variables that you guys have written down. How do we describe the amount of soil, bags of soil she bought? Right, B, right? Just B. So B describes the total amount of soil, the bags of soil. So what describes the total amount of plants that she bought? It's just P, right? So I want you to think about what totals the total amount of things she bought in general. How would we know how many bags of soil plus,
B plus P.
yeah, right, B plus P would equal the total amount of things in general. However, if I look at this problem, does it talk about how much things she buys in general? Does it say that she is going to buy no more than or no less than 5 things?
Yeah, kind of.
What does she say?
Spread at least 5.
5 what?
That kind. So she can buy that many more.
So does that describe how many bags of soil she's going to buy?
Yeah.
I want you to think about it. Does it tell us how many bags of soil she's going to buy? No. It only describes what? How many plants she's going to buy. So what describes how many plants she's going to buy? What letter do we use? P. And what does that have to be greater than or equal to? 5. So our two inequalities are just these. If you add B plus P together, that would be only if she said she's going to buy at least 10 things, right, in general. But because she's very specific here and she only talks about plants, it's only going to be P is greater than or equal to 5. See me? Okay, so the next thing we would do is we would go ahead and graph these. To try to graph these without the correct letters is kind of difficult. So what I like to do is I like to replace the different letters with X and Y. So I'm going to go ahead and transform these. And I'm going to just transform these so that I'm replacing them with the different letters, okay? So all I'm doing is I'm just changing it so that I can graph these with X and Y on an X and Y graph. You could actually graph these on a B and P graph, but to make it less confusing, I'm just going to use X and Y. Okay, does anyone have any questions so far? So last week, all we did was set it up, and then we typed in the equations, we kind of graphed it, and then that was our word problems on Delta Math. Today we're going to take it a step further and we're going to describe and we're going to answer a question here. We're going to answer a question.